Hi, and welcome to Piano Teaching Success Q&A. I'm Gillian Erskine, and together with my colleague Paul Myatt, we've created this program so you can get answers to your questions. We're so excited to be here with you today again, and if you're live with us, let us know in the chat where you're from. We have a great show lined up and a slightly different format, so we can dive deeper into some of the areas you've told us are your greatest challenges. I'm so delighted this week to be joined by Paul Myatt, this time in front of the camera. Paul's usually in the background doing all the tech. I'm so lucky for him to be in front of the camera with us today. Paul, as many of you probably know, is my co-founder with Forte School of Music. He teaches around 60 students a week in 3 afternoons in his Forte School of Music in Sydney, Australia. Paul loves class teaching. That's how he can do 60 students in 3 afternoons a week. And it currently has students in every grade from grade 1 to grade 8. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much, and great to be here, Gillian.
It sure is. Well, later in the show, we're going to be taking a look at the world of body mapping with Jane Shelshear. And you'll be amazed at how some simple changes can make a huge difference in how our students play. Right now, though, we're going to kick off today's show with the number one frustrations of all piano teachers or music teachers, I think, around the world, and that is getting kids to practice. And then if we dig deeper even more, the worst of the worst is getting kids to practice scales. So let's just take a moment here and look at practice in general. It's a big topic, and there are just so many factors, but if we just break it down to the basics. Paul, what do you think are the 3 main factors or challenges around practice in general?
Oh, I think the first one would have to be the loneliness of it. And because, for most students, they're practicing by themselves. So they have to be self-regulated and self-monitoring. And, it's lonely. And, there's no surprise that most students are more likely to play the things that they can play rather than practice the things that they can't.
Yeah, I always did. So it's a wonder we all got through it. Yeah, it's kind of hard doing the boring stuff we aren't good at too. What about, what's the second one?
Well, boring, of course, the boring stuff, because practice does require repetition, and also self-analysis. So we want to, they want to ask, we need a child or a student to ask themselves, did I do that correctly or not? Or where did I make a mistake?
Yeah. So do you get, and you also find that repetition generally is excruciatingly boring, unless you're really focused on stuff. What's the third thing?
Well, I find, I don't know about you, but I know I have previously had a lot of kids say, I just don't remember how it goes when they go home, and they just can't remember what it's supposed to sound like when they're at home.
So how do you solve these issues?
Well, there's many different ways of doing things. The one solution I've come up with that I think works really well is using backing tracks when you teach, and it solves quite a number of those issues. And my students have been using music to take home for many years. In the olden days, we used to use CDs.
Oh, well, cassettes, and even in the olden days.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've been doing this at Forte for like 26 years, haven't we? All our kids do that.
We have, and they've always been able to play or practice along with the music at home. So, but today we've got this amazing technology, and at Forte we have our interactive practice buddy at home, which plays the tracks as well as being able to slow them down or speed them up, which we could never do with cassettes or CDs.
Yeah,
So,
we always did it in class because we had MIDI file players and what have you, but kids couldn't do that at home. But now they can.
Exactly.
So let's go to one of Paul's classes playing scales, and it should make more sense of what we're saying. Let's unpack that one. So how does backing tracks solve the main challenges of getting kids to practice?
Well, I suppose the first one, it stops the loneliness because once they start playing along the tracks, they generally keep playing. And I've had parents often say to me that kids will sit down and play for ages when they're playing along with the practice buddy. The challenge is always to get them started,
Mm,
but once they do, it sort of draws them in because,
mm.
and of course now with the technology, every kid loves screens, and so that sort of solves a little bit of the lonely and the boring.
Mm. And the some of the self-regulation thing too. So many times when with the backing tracks, they go, oh, they do it at 80, and then they go, oh, I'm going to try and do it at 90. So they start to sort of looking at their own personal best and seeing whether they can sort of move it up, don't they?
Absolutely.
Mm. So the other part of loneliness or the solo nature of practice is the self-regulation and self-monitoring. So how do you find backing tracks help with that?
Well, I don't think there's anything we can do for self-regulation.
Mm,
At the end of the day, a child's got to get to the piano, and that's the first challenge.
mm.
And well, you're a mum. You've
Yeah.
both your boys played, and I know that one of your strategies was to get them to play one thing.
Yeah, in some of the very early stages. Well, early stage because we've done early baby music and what have you. But in the early stages, after about 4 years, and we were doing some keyboard ones. Yes, it was like just go to the piano and play one thing. And they'd look at me and go, "What? One thing and then I'm done?" Yeah,
Mm.
and they went, "This is like a deal I can't refuse." That just got them there. But it's just that strategy, isn't it? Just to get them there. Just do one thing. Just the practice, the fact that they actually got there, I think was a really good thing.
Exactly.
Mm.
So, with the self-monitoring, I suppose with the if you're using backing tracks in your lessons, when kids, you're teaching the kids how to hear and to play in time. So
Mm.
that builds really critical listening skills.
Mm.
And so when that gives them the opportunity to use the backing tracks at home,
Mm.
and make and they're really useful then.
Mm. It certainly does help them play in time because he's at that little cameo that we just saw then. The kids were in a class absolutely playing in time. And we've found that, haven't we, over the years, that playing with backing tracks, they don't ever really have any timing issues because
Mm.
they know how it goes and they're used to playing with what is really the most musical metronome of all, right?
Exactly.
Well, Sophie Fredericks found that when she used backing tracks, when she went into lockdown earlier this year, she was instantly lost the opportunity to teach the kids that she had at school. So she has a mixed practice where she teaches some students at a school and her own home studio. But the ones that she had at school, the school went, no extracurricular activities, no one can do it. So that really worried her because she had planned to put some students for exams. So what she did is she bought a student pass for each of her students. And I think 4 out of 5 of them just took to it like a duck to water and just learnt their scales really well, completely on their own. She was delighted with. So why do you think one of the backing tracks are good also for beginners when they're starting out, Paul?
Well, the most important thing is that they can adjust the speed.
Mm,
And because obviously when they're starting off, being able to play at a slower rate, but they're still playing in time,
yeah.
really makes a difference. So when you're using any backing track, the ability to slow them down really makes a huge difference. And there's lots of ways of doing that too.
Mm, mm. I think one of the great things about Practice Buddy is that the default speed is actually the exam speed. Like how many times when you have to constantly get the manual out and go, what speed do we have to have this for the exam? and the goal speed's there right in front of them, isn't it? In Practice Buddy.
Absolutely. So in Practice Buddy for exam scales and technical work, it just makes such a difference because they know what they've got to do.
Yeah, exactly. So the slowing down so the kids are competitive with themselves. We just talked about, how they will, in fact, we've got a little video of that, which a while back, but you're teaching one of your students, Julia, and she went, oh, can I play that slower? She knew that she didn't want to play at that speed. And then after a while, when she felt she could do it, she went, oh, can we do it at 80 or whatever? So yeah, that's good to
Exactly.
see them doing that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think it builds also that intrinsic motivation. So they're, we always talk about when children start off extrinsic motivation, and we want to move towards intrinsic motivation. And I think this really, that speed, let's play it at 70% to start with. And, can we go to 80%, and then, or 90%, and then 100%. Oh, can I do 110? The number of boys that come back and go, Mr. Paul, I can do it at 120%.
You think, well, that's great, honey, but we really don't want you playing it that fast.
But that you've built in that intrinsic motivation because it's making it fun as well.
Yeah. It's also that sort of sport thing of the PB, the personal best.
Wow, kids, how many kids, if they're, for example, they're playing cricket, bowling, how many times do they have to practice bowling, and they keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And we need exactly the same thing in music.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's move on to boring. What makes practice boring?
It's the repetition.
Well, it's just endless. It's repetition without a purpose, really, isn't it? I've got to play this 3 times. All right, 1, 2, 3, without really keeping the brain into gear on it.
Exactly. And, when you've just got that repetition for repetition's sake, there's no real, you just go on automatic pilot sort of thing. And
brain disengages, doesn't it, sometimes?
Exactly. So when we've done the tracks for our practice buddy, we've always, certainly with the scales, we're doing them 3 or 4 times. So you can do different things with each one. So you might do right hand, then left hand, then hands together, but you might just do all right hand or all left hand, or, or mix it up. So you're starting to really get, making it more fun as well.
Yeah, it makes a variety. And I think we've got some flashcards in each one of them too, that you can play this flashcard. So it's another way of making the brain become engaged, isn't it? And you can build in some game-based learning, right?
Yes, gamification is one of the best ways to get children engaged with the learning, and the fact that they have to sort of come in at the right time is really important.
Because all of our tracks have got introductions. They're not a click track. It's not a click track. They've got to listen. I come in at the right time. So it's sort of like skipping rope. The skipping rope, the skipping, and now I'm going to come in.
Yes, exactly. And then you can add more gamification too, as well. Lots of different things that you can add.
Okay, so we've got a clip of you showing how to turn up the gamification with scales. This is one with you're doing it, isn't it? Let's see that now.
It is, yes.
So why is an activity like this so good, other than being really fun?
Well, there's a number of different things. The first thing I'll start with is keyboard geography. So they have to find the note on the piano to start with. So I don't know if you noticed, I was doing one ascending scale and then one descending scale with the same hand. So they had to start on a C. I had to start on a C, and then I had to use a different finger to come down on the C, but in the same spot. So that's really, really important.
You also ran around the stool in a different way, different times, didn't you?
Well, yes, I'll tell you why, because you start to get giddy if you go the same way.
Yeah, that is best. Okay, well, what else is good about doing an activity like that?
Well, it resets the brain. each time, and the brain doesn't get bored. So, and we're using both sides of our brain as well. So, all the movement, and we have to go then and find the correct note. And our brain requires oxygen, and that comes from red blood cells. And when you are moving, you have an elevated heart rate. So yeah, moving is really good.
Well, Cecily liked it. Cecily Morgan's on with us today, and she found, hey, it seems like so much fun. It is.
Exactly. And they also, obviously you want them to play evenly throughout. So maybe, you may not be able to start at the full speed, but they can build up to it as well. They're also going to be playing in time.
Mm.
And most importantly, I think it's listen and come in on time.
Mm. Exactly. Well, the three main challenges of getting students to practice anything, and in particular scales, is loneliness and the self-monitoring, the boringness of repetition, and remembering how it's supposed to sound, which are all solved really by using backing tracks. So let's just tell everyone how we came up with this idea.
Well, I teach a lot of students. I used to teach 120 kids a week, and the majority of them doing piano exams. And I've always used, or at Forte, we've always used backing tracks, but of course, we never had backing tracks for scales.
No.
And it was driving me nuts. And 6 weeks out from the exam, I'd be having panic scale practice days, 2 hours on the weekend, and make all the kids come in. And it's one of the reasons I started doing the tracks for the scales, because we'd always use the tracks with pieces, and it worked really, really well. And I thought, oh, maybe this will work with scales as well. So I came up with the concept of developing the tracks, and then we've put them in together in the practice buddy for scales and technical work.
And the kids have loved it. So we thought, well, how useful would this be to all piano teachers? Because we're all facing the same challenges, getting kids ready for exams. So we went crazy. And we put together we put them together for 5 syllabuses. Is that right?
Yes.
The ABRSM, Trinity College, the 2 AMB syllabuses, and ANSCA, and Royal.
And Royal Conservatory. So it's actually 6.
Well, the hardest things to teach is broken chords. And Paul put this clip together on how to teach broken chords. We played it last week, but it's so good. We'd like to show it again.
Broken chords are used in many exam syllabi in the early grades. They can be a real challenge for many students because they often use the wrong fingers on the wrong notes, and they can't remember the finger patterns because they're different on both the right and left hands. There's often a lot of tension in their playing, and they require constant repetition to achieve fluidity of movement, rhythmic evenness, and a legato touch. I'm going to share with you a way to teach broken chords that will offer you and your students success from the very first lesson of teaching this concept, using whole body learning strategies and backing tracks. And the bonus benefits of doing this, lots of repetition, which means they start to get good at it. Singing and speaking, meaning they use more senses when they're learning, and this helps to improve memory function and, of course, build oral development, which means they're going to play in time and develop a better ear for music. First of all, you'll want to get the chord shapes into your students' hands. With the Practice Buddy backing track, have your students play a root position chord up the piano along with the music. Each exam track on Practice Buddy has 3 speeds. Your student can start with a lower practice speed and work up to the full exam speed. You can also adjust any track speed by percentage. Before playing the inversions of A minor along with the track like we did with the root position, use the broken chord kit to show your students how to work out the inversions. You can see I'm moving the lowest note letter up an octave to show the first inversion and then the second inversion of A minor. Now your student has a visual understanding of the inversion. Ask them to play each of these chords with the correct fingers on the piano and then along with the backing track, just like they did for the root position chord. Once your students know all three inversions with the correct fingers as individual block chords, use the broken chord kit to work out which inversions play using the same fingers and which use different fingers. Use the green numbers when you use your second finger. I suggest you introduce one hand first and then play the block chords in that hand along with the backing track. Once your student is confident with playing the block chords along with the backing track, break each chord inversion up one at a time and play along with the backing track like this. All that individual chord playing may take a little time, but I can assure you the outcome will be so strongly embedded in your students' neurology and muscle memory that they will rarely make a mistake. Also, learning other broken chords becomes so much easier. This teaching strategy will definitely set your students up for success in playing broken chords correctly, and it will also help your students with better keyboard geography skills, improved rhythmic skills, improved listening skills, and offer your students an auditory experience of keys. And then there's the beginning to develop some of the skills for collaborative playing, and they are sympathetic playing, listening to an introduction, coming in on time, and of course playing together in time. The Practice Buddy is available at Piano Teaching Success.
Thank you. That's great. Well, if we back up a bit, ideally before you've taught broken chords, you've probably taught some basic chords. So let's look at how to start teaching chords to beginners and to anyone really, and then how we move on to lead sheets. So the main challenges really is knowing, for if you have never taught chords, or even if you have and you've had a bit of a disaster, or it's been a bit lumpy and not exactly flowed very well. So the main challenges is knowing like how to start, which chords to teach first, and what position to play them in. Because if you just do them all in a root position, they sound chunky and not very nice. And it's just really, really hard to play. And then how to segue into playing with lead sheets. So Paul, would you outline the step-by-step process that we use?
Sure, Gillian. So, step one is to start with chords and relating them to scales or pentascales. Now, that can be really boring without a backing track. So, having music to play along with really gives it some context.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's the step two?
Well, you want to break them away from the music because they really need to get the chords in their fingers. So to get them thinking in patterns before they think of moving on to lead sheets. So they really need to know those chords really well in their fingers before they move on to playing with lead sheets. And the way to do that we use flashcards to do that.
We do. Well, Paul, you put together a bit of a video example on how to do this. So let's have a look. Okay, let's just unpack that a little bit. How does the flashcard relate to what you were playing?
Right. Well, let me show you. So the first thing you can do is, so this is the flashcard. So the red circles are the scales or notes, and the green circles are the chords.
Mhm.
So in the first one, you're playing right-hand notes and left-hand chords. So it's set up in the same way as music would be, so in a grand staff. So the second one is left-hand chords. And then the third one is just right-hand notes. And the last one is right-hand chords and left-hand notes. So to get to that sort of combo stage, that actually takes a lot of
It's
practice.
pretty
So
tricky.
it is. And, this is just a simple pentascale. And imagine what you can do if, when you start using whole scales where you're playing chord 1, chord 4, and 5, 7.
Yeah, exactly. So what's step 3?
Well, of course, it's playing. So in lead sheets, it's playing simple songs that they've already played or at least heard, and they have a limited note range, and it's really important that they can play the right hand with ease before trying to combine the chords in the left hand. So you don't want them to have to focus too much on the melody, and being concerned about what the right hand is playing.
Yeah, exactly. So really to get them to segue them from the chords and into that. So the first thing is to get them playing the chords and like with pentascale, so they know what notes go with what chords. And then breaking them away from the music. So because that's what they have to be. They have to be broken away from the music if they're going to be able to play with lead sheets. They haven't got any dots to read. So they've got to start thinking in patterns. And then the third thing is to do something where the melody is kind of a little bit on remote control so that they can still focus in what they're going to be doing in the left hand. So you've put together a little bit of video on this.
I have. This is the lead sheet pack that we've created for beginners. So I'll just share with everyone what it's about.
We've put together a lead sheets starter kit for you. It's available from Black Rock music shops in Australia and the UK, and it's just $7 Australian or £4. The lead sheet pack includes 13 well-known songs, chord playing styles and endings, and of course worked examples to assist you and your students. It's studio licensed, so you can print these off as many times as you like in your studios. Songs include London Bridge, Twinkle Twinkle, Ode to Joy, Jingle Bells, This Old Man, Pop Goes the Weasel, Chopsticks, For He's a Jolly Good Fellow, Lavender's Blue, and more. The Lead Sheets Starter Kit can also be your free bonus when you purchase the Piano Fundamentals Practice Buddy at Blackrock Music or Piano Teaching Success. It's just $31 Australian, £18 or $25 US. To use the teaching strategies we've shared today, you're going to need backing tracks that have the correct version of the scales and technical work for every different exam syllabus. Luckily, Piano Teaching Success Practice Buddy has exactly that. Your students can get a Practice Buddy Student Pass, which has everything your student needs to excel at scales, broken chords, and arpeggios. The adjustable speed backing tracks are set at exam speed and can be slowed down in the early stages of learning. Tracks have been harmonically constructed so that fragment learning and repetition is built in. That means you can teach just one concept. It might be playing one fragment of a scale, broken chord, or arpeggio so that your student can repeat that one thing several times as the track plays. Repetition. Playing with backing tracks makes it so easy. But shh! Your students will be having so much fun they won't even realise. Being able to see the full list of exam scales in one glance gives your students and their parents a really good idea of how much learning is needed to be exam ready, and as teachers we know how important that is. The downloadable Fast Track Scale Kits have many ways for students to learn their scales, which means every student's learning style is catered for. Everything from fingering charts and full colour graphical notation to flashcards and success charts will help you and your students keep track of what they're up to. This whole body learning approach makes scales and technical work fun for all learners in a multi-sensory way. When you use Practice Buddy in your studio, you'll be teaching scales like an expert. When your students are playing along with Practice Buddy at home, in no time at all, they'll be playing like an expert and having fun. Teachers, you're going to want to access all the levels, so we've bundled together the student passes for each exam syllabus together in your own special teacher pass. Any of the passes can be purchased in one of 9 currencies, and student passes are great value in your currency for just £19 in the UK or $31 in Australia. The teacher bundle is amazing value at £77 in the UK or $127 in Australia, and they're all available at pianoteachingsuccess.com. This month, when you purchase a Practice Buddy Teacher Pack, you'll receive a special gift from us of Piano Fundamentals, valued at £19 or $31 Australian. Piano Fundamentals is the perfect companion for your students' tutor books and includes pentascales, 1-octave scales, and integrating chord playing. Piano Fundamentals is the easiest way to introduce chord playing to all of your students, no matter which level they are. Piano Fundamentals, along with the Lead Sheets Starter Kit, is our gift to you when you purchase a Practice Buddy Teacher Pass in July. Choose the Practice Buddy Teacher Pass for the syllabus you teach, and you'll receive all 5 levels from initial or preliminary to grade 4, the Fundamentals Practice Buddy, and the Lead Sheets Starter Kit, which is valued at $193 and is yours for just $127 Australian or £118 for just £77. And all of the teaching resources you've seen me use to teach broken chord will be in your Getting Started course. Practice Buddy is the best way to learn scales, but if you've used it with your students and you don't like it, let us know in 7 days and we'll give you a full refund. The Practice Buddy is available at Piano Teaching Success. So what are teachers saying about the Practice Buddy? Well, Heather Watson from Perth says, students immediately pay more attention when I produce the scale backing tracks. I'm using them right from the beginning of introducing scales. It helps establish a steady beat from the outset. We often just listen and tap along before even playing. It's also easier to discuss major and minor modes while listening. And Mary Ashenden from Adelaide says, I love having everything easily accessible in each grade for each exam and not having to go and check the exam syllabus all the time. So if you'd like Practice Buddy for you and your students, check it out at pianoteachingsuccess.com and click on the Practice Buddy link.
Well, if you're watching us live today, let us know in the chat or if what your greatest challenge is in teaching scales. We'd love to know that. And also, if you're watching us on Facebook after the show, you're not watching us live, just post it below in a comment. We'd just love to know what your challenges are. See whether they're the same as us. Okay, as we Zoom or Skype into our students' homes, we've had a window into their practice rooms. And one of the big surprises has been, or perhaps disappointments, we've had is the instruments they're playing on and their seating arrangements. Some of the surprises have included, no, a dining chair is not the correct height for a piano. Sitting cross-legged on the floor is not good. And the dining table does not make a good keyboard stand. Paul has a story about this, which he'll share with you in a minute. It's so much about how our students play and their technique and the sound they produce can be solved by seating position and body position. And Jane Shellshire is an expert in the field of body mapping, which is about developing spatial awareness and using simple ideas to improve our playing and our sound. Here's Jane to explain what body mapping is all about and how it came about.
So was it developed in America?
It was William and Barbara Conable were in America, and then Barbara took that and she really wanted to start an organisation that had this vision for changing the culture of piano pedagogy, because up till that point, any kind of movement information wasn't really part of the normal equation.
Mm-hmm.
And she was trying to help a lot of musicians who were injured or in pain, or just musicians who really felt there was a limitation to how far they could get in their playing, because that limitation sometimes feels like a physical one. I know that was how I felt, and why I went and sought out Alexander work, and then body mapping really felt like I kind of hit a wall and things should be feeling easier than this. So I thought there must be something, just information missing, and that was really wonderful to find the body mappers. So we're all a group of musicians. You have to be a musician to be a body mapper. And we do quite thorough anatomical and scientific kind of study. But because we're musicians, we're interested in it being accessible and useful for musicians.
Yes.
So it's about being able to package that in a way that you can use in the studio yourself in a very simple way, but it makes a really impactful difference.
Mm-hmm. So with Alexander technique, a lot, as you said before, a lot of musicians do look into Alexander technique, but it's more of a generalist look at how we sit and how we should be sitting and all the rest of it, but not specifically always related to playing piano.
Yeah, it wasn't developed specific for. I mean, it can be applied,
yes.
And I just felt like I needed more guidance to know how I could teach movement to people without teaching them Alexander technique in an Alexander technique lesson. I wanted it to be part of my music teaching.
Now let's look at how to get started with body mapping.
Well, what I thought was a good place to start was that really in music teaching, the main category of movement that we're used to hearing about is what happens with our hands. So the other big category is how do we deliver our hands to the keyboard? And essentially that comes down to balancing on the piano bench and what we do to achieve balance. So I suppose the most common advice given to me was to sort of sit up straight. Nothing further was sort of described. So it was very well meaning, but there was nothing I really could work with in that information. I didn't think it was very high quality information to sit up straight. And so rather than what is really describing how I would look from the outside, body mapping says, well, what's happening inside in order to balance on the bench? And balance is a very dynamic thing. And thank goodness, because we're constantly moving to play. So, you know, being in a fixed position isn't very useful, I don't think. So balancing on the bench, the first thing I would say to a student is, what are you sitting on? And they look at me straight to the bench. I say, yes, there's the bench. And then what of you are you sitting on? And they generally look a little shy and start giggling a little bit, and they say, oh, my bottom, you know. Yes. But what inside are you using to balance on the bench? And you get all kinds of answers, and not very many of them will understand, and there's no reason they should, because they've never been taught this before most time. So I ask them to sit on their hands. So I'm going to do that now. And you can do that, Gillian, just sitting on your hands. And what you'll sense is that you can feel underneath there's some bony structure. Bones. Exactly. So what you're sitting on there are called sitting bones. And keep sitting on your hands for a while. And you'll notice that if you needed to go into the base of the piano, you can completely come onto one sitting bone. The pressure changes and you can come onto the other. You can come towards the keyboard and you can feel that the pressure moves at a different point along that bone, and you can come right back off them as well.
Yeah.
So the main thing is that everything above what you're sitting on your hands is your torso, and it can just balance over those bones. That's exactly what they're designed to do. And the reason it works so well is that when you're balanced on your sitting bones, your spine is free. And so I sometimes explain to people, we use our hands a lot in body mapping to get a sense of our body. So I'll put my hands, one on the front on my tummy and one on the back, and I'll say exactly halfway between those, my two hands, is the part of my spine that bears my weight. So it's very central. And then I'll use my two hands on the side. So right in between my two hands, right in my middle, is the part of my spine that bears my weight, the core of my spine. Oftentimes, people have an idea that their spine is at the back, and that's where you can actually feel knobbly bits, but that's about 5% of the full dimension of a spine. And that's not the part that's made for taking my weight and supporting me. That's the part that just protects my spinal cord and the nerves, very important. But when it comes to managing my mass as I'm sitting, it's got nothing to do with my balance. So when I'm on my sitting bones, my spine is free and it's curved and it's central. So if you put your hands back at your lumbar, so one on your tummy and one on your lower back, if you do the kind of traditional sitting up straight idea, you might feel that at the hand on your back, you can feel that the lumbar curve just sort of increased. And then if you roll and have a nice slump the other way, you can feel the opposite. So your back's kind of gone into a C shape. So we're trying to find a balance that's somewhere in between those, not incredibly upright and not really slumped. It's like the three bears, isn't it? Not too hot, not too cold. It's just nicely in the middle and centralized. So when I balance in that way, it's quite easy. And I had a student just the other day, and there were a lot of things going on in her movement, and we just mapped her sitting bones for her in that same way that we just did. And it really made a difference. And I hadn't said anything about sitting up straight or anything like that. And it looked easy to do, like it does with young children.
And you've got a bit of a, you've got a what do you call it, bone structure there. So we can, I was actually fascinated when you said then that, because I always think of my spine being at the back where I can feel that.
That's right. And it makes sense where you can feel.
Yeah.
But because it's so central and you've got all your organs and everything, lungs and whatever, all around it, you can't really feel exactly where it is. So you have to use some kinesthetic imagination. So
it's quite thick when you look at that, isn't it, really?
Quite thick, yeah. So for people at home, if you put your hands around your thigh just above your knee, and when you bring your hands out, you'll have a dimension sort of like that. That's about the size of your lumbar spine.
Wow.
Big, chunky. I can't get one hand all the way around it. And it's really strong, and it's actually got hydraulics. So you've got discs that are fluid filled, and so it gives you buoyancy. And the curves make it stronger. And so this whole idea of sitting up straight, there's nothing I've ever studied that supports that idea that, you know, we should be straight somehow, because the curves are part of how our spine needs to be to make us strong and movable at the same time.
So if anything, rather than straight, we should be sort of sitting in a neutral, like yoga talks about neutral positions and Pilates and all of that.
Kind of balance, yeah. And then we can come away from that point and return to it over and over and over. So balance is really the way we teach it, a very dynamic thing. It's not a set and forget. So it's something we need to start developing a skill to listen to, just the way we listen, you know, when we're saying to our students, keep listening to how you're playing. You can keep sensing your balance on the bench. And you can see that the sitting bones are these ones, which are not part of the spine at all.
And they're not flat.
And they're not flat. They're nicely curved like rockers. And the other good thing about it is you can see here's the hip joint, which is higher than where I'm balancing on. So my legs are free to move. I'm not sitting on my legs at all. So yeah, we sometimes get out the spine.
Because a lot of kids, I'm always dragging the piano stool out because they kind of sit on the top of they sit the whole bottom, including their upper thighs on the seat, and it's taking the balance off the sit bones and putting much more weight into those upper thighs, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes, if just mapping it isn't enough for them, what I also do is just make them stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down and play. And quite often you'll find that they're already quite differently placed on the bench, and you've got them out of that kind of slumping down thing.
Well, that's
and
right.
Again,
if they sit too much
without
on their...
saying anything about being straight. So, yeah.
If they're sitting too much on their... I always say to them, that's a bench. That's actually not a seat. They think of it as a seat. So therefore they want to put their bottom and their all sort of upper thighs on it. They sit back in it. And I go, no. It's only just really a bottom rest, you know. And that's to try and get that idea of sitting on those sit bones.
Yeah.
Rather than the whole of the sit bones and those upper thighs.
Yes.
Because as soon as they do that, then their back wants to slump, doesn't it? Because the weight's not sort of right.
Yeah. I always say that's great for watching TV.
Yeah.
But not really useful for playing the piano. And I think the other thing with students I do is let them slump and play and try to notice what is that doing for my playing versus when I'm balanced on my sit bones. Oh, I'm actually more movable, and this makes this thing easier or whatever. So going back and forth between the two teaches them how to gauge where they are at any one time. And, you know, we see them for an hour or half hour a week, and the rest of the time it's going to be up to them to know what they're doing. And so it's the beginning of developing that sense of moving while they are playing that's going to be really vital to them being able to manage themselves, be self-sufficient, and really start to enjoy moving at piano more. I think one of the things about piano, it's a strange instrument. I love it, but you know, it doesn't move with us. You know, the interiors move, yes, but more than any other instrumentalist, I think we need to know about how to move around. I can't even reach 88 keys without moving to get to them. So I think it's fixed, and the bench is fixed, and that's a good thing, because when we have fixed surfaces, we can remember that we're the ones who are moving around them if we are stable but also dynamically balanced.
Paul, you were with Jane working behind the camera when we did this interview, and you went back to your studio that afternoon to implement some of these ideas. You were pretty excited to do that. I remember you telling me you were pretty blown away about the difference that it made. So what was the difference?
Well, I could not believe how, my kids, I've been talking to them about sitting up straight and things like that. And of course, which is exactly what Jane was saying. And then I went and talked, we found their sit bones, and they went all giggly and silly and all that sort of thing. And I just found, and we went through this whole process, and the difference, it was just remarkable. It was a grade 3 class, I think, or grade 4 class. It was just remarkable, their difference in their playing just after doing that. What I've found though, and we kept talking about it all the time, and one of the good things about COVID is being able to see into everyone's, bedrooms or houses and what have you, practice spaces. And there's one boy that I teach who he plays beautifully, but he always has flat fingers. And I, sit on your sit bones, put your feet on the floor, all that sort of thing. And he will sit up, and sit better. And then I saw him when we were doing online lessons, and it was like, oh my goodness, that is why you're always playing so badly, because he was sitting on a dining chair, he was playing uphill It was just terrible. And so
Was the keyboard on a dining table? Like, was he
no, it was a piano, but it was there's a family with 3 kids, and they've all got they just bought a digital piano, but they were all on a keyboard, which I think was on the dining room table. But he was still using the dining room chair.
What level was he at?
Grade 3.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, he's doing grade 4 this year. I know. It is amazing he got there. Yeah. In fact, he nearly didn't last year because he got chickenpox, but he made it on the day. He was all pockmarked when he went for his exam.
Yeah.
But
so you used a story actually with your kids, didn't you?
yeah, so I've started this story with my students where because during COVID, a lot of families would go bicycle riding. So there was this real analogy with bicycle riding. And I talked about, how it's hard to ride up a hill. And we talk about all the hills around the area and how good it was to ride downhill or on the flat. And I said, well, playing the piano is just the same. If you're playing uphill, then it's harder to play. If you play downhill, it's easier to, downhill or on the flat, it's easier to play. So spent a great deal of time working on getting them seated well and using that analogy.
Yeah, you used an app too, like a video. You videoed them or took a photo of them.
I did it. I videoed them, and of course now they all want to be videoed. Am I playing uphill or downhill? So
well, that's good. At least you've keyed them into it. They're thinking about it.
Exactly.
We've got a video, haven't we, of your class that just after you had corrected them before they did that exam.
Yes. So this is a little snippet of a piece it's the piece out of the Trinity grade 3 called Badlands. So the boy in question is in the first part of the video, and then you'll see my class that I actually went to who are playing the piano in the second half. They're the class I went to after I spent the morning with Jane.
They're great. I think one of the things that's always remarkable when we see your videos is that how well they play together, how well they are totally in sync. And that's years of really practicing with backing tracks, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And class lessons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, really good. Well, let's see how Jane implements this with her very beginner students.
So I like to include this information from the very first pieces that are in the kind of piano adventure series. And everyone's familiar with this sort of scenario where the text is teaching kids to find different keys along the piano. So this one from Piano Adventures, the primer level, 2 black ants. The kids are finding the 2 black notes down the keyboard and playing like that. So what I like to do is extend it so that we say, yes, we're playing the 2 black notes, and you're noticing how you're going to balance to reach them. So you can start up higher in that left hand and just extend the range you're using, or you can swap hands so that the right hand is playing the bass, so they're learning how to balance even when they need to make a sort of a spiraling movement in the spine. And that's what's coming, that's what's really coming in pieces as they advance. But when they're at this stage, obviously the pieces have to remain very simple. I just don't want the ideas to be thrown out until they suddenly appear in grade 4 and they're none the wiser, you know, so what happened to my piece that was nicely here just in front of me. So the same, there's the old clock, and there's a nice duet part, and they're usually playing right hand up the top, left hand an octave lower. So just swapping it round helps them a little bit, or making it much higher and much lower, so they're starting to move a bit as they play. So
And this would be really good. Oh, sorry to interrupt. This would be really good with, if you've just done that, you know, what we were just talking about before about getting on your sit bones and feeling those sit bones, and really, and then going straight into that where they can really be focused on, because this is really simple what they're doing with their hands.
Yeah.
They can really be focused on the rocking on those sit bones from one to another.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm sure everyone out there is, you know, super creative teachers. They'll work out all kinds of ways to be able to incorporate that. The other thing I like to do is take that whole idea and swap it around as they're doing something a little more complicated. So they might be playing a piece. This is all with third fingers, and it's just called a study. This is from the Russian School of Piano Playing that I like to use. Right hands, left hands. So it's already got a little bit of the balancing happening, but when they're good with that, I like to swap it around and say, okay, we're going to start with the right hand, and every note I want you to swap hands. So it's just more fun. Well, so anything that you feel you can extend the range so that they need to work with their balance a bit more, or change hands around so that they're moving more and being used to that, I think is a good thing at those really early stages. And that way they keep that kind of flexibility that they bring to the piano when they're really little ones, and you know, they're all over it.
Yeah. And I also like that you're breaking them out of the music. We don't have to stick, oh my gosh, those dots only say this, but you know, this is a pattern. Let's extend that pattern. This is how we can do it. It's sort of even just very early stages of creativity and just expanding it. We don't have to get glued and fixed.
There's only one other thing I do, and I have some students who have some learning issues, and for them, I purchased one of these, which is called a sit and move cushion. And I kind of liked it so much I use it with all my students. So if you're having trouble sort of with the student becoming aware of what's happening in their balance, sitting on one of these exaggerates everything. So when you come onto one sitting bone to reach the top of the keyboard, you're really moving a lot, and you can kind of hear it with this cushion. So I have them sit on that for a little while, and then when you take it away, they go, oh yeah, I really was moving a lot. I didn't notice. And we want them to notice so that they are going to use the bench for being fixed and not make some kind of fixture in themselves and have to move around that. So that's a fun tool to use as well.
My personal trainer makes me do squats on those. I have to stand on it and balance up and down. So I could imagine, on the stool, it's actually having to get them to perhaps even engage their abs a bit, maybe, would it?
I don't know. I just think it exaggerates the feeling of, I've got to find some kind of support in that center.
Yeah.
And also I need to have my feet on the ground or on some surface. Otherwise I'm going flying off the edge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good tool. And where do you get those from?
I got this one from online. I bought it at Sensory Tools. So they have a lot of toys for kids on the autism spectrum and things like that. But yeah, I enjoy it too.
We can have fun doing this, right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And in pieces where you're moving a lot, you can have something like this or sit on a sports ball. It really engages your legs in what you're doing, and you start to realize that you can use your legs to maneuver around the keyboard as well. And that's kind of what I think we're going to be talking about next, which is
good. Let's tell us about that.
Well, I think it comes down to, again, that support. So that normal force, you can sense it through your feet. often we're not taught anything about our legs with piano. I mean, you're lucky if someone mentions, you know, keep your heel on the ground while you pedal, and that's kind of it.
How many you
But
see do the whole thing lifts up?
That's right. When I first sort of, when I was studying body mapping, and someone said, you know, what's happening with your legs? And I started to have to wake up to what's happening in my legs. And I mean, a lot of balance information comes up through your feet. And so I really wanted to challenge myself with something tricky and see if what happened with my balance when I had to move my legs a lot. So I found this Scott Joplin rag, and you're only supposed to use your heel to tap on the floor in one of the sections. But I wanted to make it really challenging, so I was practicing by lifting my whole foot. So I thought I'd play that today.
Yeah.
And I brought a little stool to make a bit of a noise so that my tapping's part of the music.
Oh, cool. What is this piece called?
This is called the Ragtime Dance. So it's a typical kind of Scott Joplin. It's really nice. That kind of thing you're familiar with, but you get to a section later on, and the stomping is part of the rhythmic interest of the piece. A bit of fun.
Yes, I reckon making that tapping sound would make the whole thing just turn up the difficulty level.
Yeah, that was my idea. So I'm not suggesting that you necessarily leap straight into that with your students.
Well, we'll have that full interview went for about an hour. So we'll put the full interview with Jane in the show notes. And if you'd like to know more, you can go there. And Jane has put together a Facebook group just really recently called Piano Game Changer. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, that's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank Jane Shelshear and Paul Mart for being with us. And as always, you can join our watch list and receive the episode straight to your inbox, or you can catch the replay on Facebook in our Facebook group, Piano Teaching Success. We're going to be back in 2 weeks' time, and we're going to be back to our normal, usual Q&A panel format. And we have a fabulous panel lined up, including Dorothy Chia, who is joining us from Singapore. Dorothy works in Singapore and Malaysia with teachers, with her workshops, her YouTube. She's also written some theory books and also books on piano pedagogy. Leonie Cohen is a Sydney-based jazz pianist, composer and piano teacher, and Leonie's going to be sharing her expertise and her music with us next week. Stuart Storer is an AMEB and Rock School examiner, 4-day school owner, class teacher. Stuart has 2 kids. He taught his 2 kids, and they both went on to attain diplomas on more than one instrument. Stuart plays bass in the family rock band, which guest stars at their annual 4-day festival concert in front of hundreds, possibly thousands, of students and families. I know you're going to enjoy meeting Stuart. Well, we love questions, so make sure you send us them in. And there are 3 ways you can do it: to send us an email, post it in our Facebook Piano Teaching Success Facebook group, or click Ask a Question on our website, pianoteachingsuccess.com. I'd like to thank Paul Mart, who's been with us today and is also responsible for all the videos and behind the scenes tech. On behalf of both of us, stay well, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.